The little insight they had was children sometimes do not fully participate in life because they are very scared that their clothes will get dirty and they will get shouted at home. That's why when kids go to school in uniform, I'm not talking about rowdy kids, but generally, most kids are very scared about getting Daag on their uniform because they're scared. So Surf took on this stance of Daag Ache Hain, which was like giving children an open ticket to go and have fun, participate in the world, help other people. Even if you get dirty doing that, it does not matter because Surf will take care of that. So a brand is something which builds a relation. So for the mother, what is it telling the mother? It's telling the mother, we are here with you to bring up your child in the best possible way. And from a purely economic transaction of exchanging some money and buying a pack of surf, you have made that into an emotional connection where the mother now feels if I want to bring my kids up the right way, I must have this brand in my house. So,
Welcome to the Mixed Emotions podcast. This is your host, Mihir Oka.
Welcome to the Mixed Emotions podcast,
sure.
where we talk about the seen and the unseen, the nuances of life, where there is a lot of context behind decision making. And today we have somebody who is innovation catalyst, a design thinking trainer, and a master at storytelling. And he's also a best-selling author. He's written 3 books. He's a management consultant. Uh, he's written 3 books. One is The Madness Starts at 9, which is a crazy, hilarious take on the things that go on in an advertising firm. His other 2 books are Lessons from the Playground and Sportivity. Basically, sports inspired creative thinking and decision making and leadership values and what brands can take from and get inspired from through sports. So it's not just all work, it's also play related inspiration that people can take. Vinay, thank you so much for taking out the time to talk and gracing this podium. And you went from being an engineer to doing an MBA and then getting into advertising. Did engineering really help you in your advertising career? Was it the sports angle, or how did you get into marketing from a tech field?
So, firstly, thank you for your kind words and for inviting me. It's always very interesting to talk to somebody who is starting on an entrepreneurial journey so young in life. I think that is something your generation has become very good at. And it's fascinating for me to see your journey from afar, actually, since I have seen you as a very young person as well. So it's an interesting question that how did you come to, let's say, marketing or branding or creativity after doing engineering? In many ways, there's an old joke which goes around that in India, people do engineering before finding out what they want to do in life. I was somebody who was academically very good. And at that point in time, when I was in school, engineering and medicine were the two big career options. And there was a time where I was genuinely interested in science in terms of what it can do to improve human lives through technology. So that kind of brought me to the path of engineering. And if I were to look back, engineering is something I never regret because whilst I probably do next to nothing which is related to engineering today, I think it gave me some fundamentals in life, not just in terms of thinking, but also in terms of temperament. Because the rigor of engineering makes you very good at logical thinking or analytical thinking, which is a very useful skill anyway, whatever you do in life. So you have this troubleshooting mindset whenever you look at any situation. You're trying to identify where the bugs might be, right? So that's a very useful attitude to have. And because at the time I did it, especially, I think it was really difficult to get through engineering. That also gave me some very important qualities at a personal level in terms of resilience, self-belief, discipline when the time demanded it, and those kinds of things. So while I do not do anything close to engineering in today's time, I would always look back at that period of my life with great fondness. I thought I also met a lot of very interesting guys during my engineering course, and I think a lot of your learning comes from the friends you interact with at the various places you are at, and the connections that you make, and how somebody from a different background or a different department or a different cultural upbringing can really bring some new ideas into your thinking. So in many ways, I don't really ever regret engineering.
Yeah.
In fact, I'm a proud engineer, at least on paper.
Good accolade for your CV if it ever was required. But you went you came up with something called the Da Vinci Code. And how do you break up and how do you find for brands to understand narrative of storytelling? Do you want to take us through what do you mean by that? And in a short attention
So,
span, how do you? Yeah, go ahead.
oh, the Da Vinci Code is the full title of that is Cracking the Da Vinci Code.
Right.
And one of the so after engineering, I did management and I did advertising.
Yes.
And as I was working with various ad agencies, one thing which really came to the forefront of my thinking or my interest was how do you get people to think more creatively? This was a very fascinating question to me. And since I had been through engineering and management, and then I'd come to a field like advertising. So those two previous fields, engineering and management, I would say as great domains to teach you sequential and analytic thinking. But advertising was a different cup of tea in every sense of the word. And it was all about making lateral connections and taking leaps of imagination. It unleashed your imagination. So I was always fascinated by the juxtaposition of these two types of thinking. And the thing I noticed was nobody, no school, no institution really takes the process of teaching somebody to think more creatively as seriously as it should. A lot of curriculums are all about what to think. So it's a lot of subject matter which we have to master. But I think there is something which is more important, which is mental flexibility, which is more in terms of how do we think around the problem. And that is something through actual experiences of tracking brand campaigns, working with creative people and strategic people. I began to get a very experiential and real life exposure to that. The second thing I did is I started reading up a lot also on things like lateral thinking. And I tried to figure out how do we make people enjoy the process of thinking, and after that how do we unleash their thinking potential in terms of tackling challenging problems. So out of that was born this program, and I titled it also, it's a little quirky thing.
Yeah.
There is this book which I liked at that point in time called Cracking the Da Vinci Code by Dan Brown. So it was a sort of riff on that, cracking the Da Vinci Code. But the important word there is Da Vinci.
Right.
So Leonardo da Vinci is one of my, and I think for most people, an intellectual hero. He was, he had the kind of mental flexibility and elasticity of mind which absolutely has to be marveled at. He was a painter, he was a sculptor, he was a engineer, he was a event manager, he was a poet. The joke I always crack is that if he was in today's day and time, if he was ever applying for a job, the HR department would have a really hard time of in terms of slotting his resume somewhere.
Right.
Because this man was good at everything. So what was it which made him what he was. So those are the kinds of questions which began to play at the back of my mind, and I set about making a program which would, in some way, in the course of a day or sometimes 2 days or whatever, get the batch that I was with, the audience that I had, inspired about their own thinking potential. And the key was to make it a lot of fun. Because, see, one of the biggest insights in Indian education, and especially when it comes to corporate, I'll talk about Indian education and then about corporate training.
Right.
When it comes to Indian education, we just 99% of the people who are going through education absolutely hate it. It's like the tunnel in Shawshank Redemption, where this guy has to crawl through the sewer
Yeah.
for about 5 kilometers before he gets to freedom. That's what all your courses are. People are just waiting to get out at the end of it for freedom, which is a better job or a better resume, whatever that might be. There is no real enjoyment of that journey, which is a very, you realize as you grow older in life, the things you learn with enjoyment are the things which stay with you the most, and the things you begin to apply the most in your own working. So that was, let's say, school and college kind of training. And when it came to corporates, the thing was, training usually was a day for a free lunch, an offsite. It's just jaake maza karte hain. Basically, that's the whole attitude, which is fine because in many ways it's a stress buster for people who are really working day and night in the corporate world. But within that framework, I always thought, is there a way to get the interest of the room at a really high level and get them to at least pick up one or two things which, going back to their desks or going back to their homes, they could incorporate in their own lives to become better at thinking. I think Edward de Bono has said this: the quality of your life is directly proportional to the quality of your thoughts. And I think this is extremely, because the biggest asset you have is your ability to think your way through problems.
Right.
So, cracking the Da Vinci Code is my humble attempt to start that conversation. It uses a lot of humor, a lot of group exercises, a lot of storytelling to get people to be more inspired, more imaginative, more insightful, more intuitive.
So this is on an individual level that you do. It's not on a company level on how the brand should think. It is more on how a person should think, and then you would set out a narrative on how, or is that a completely different program?
So there are two ways to look at this. All brand thinking happens courtesy teams which are there in an organization.
Right.
And the better those teams think, the better the brand story becomes, or the better the brand strategy becomes, or the better the ideas which
Right.
are cracked on the brand. So if you see, cracking the Da Vinci Code is more about unleashing your thinking potential. And it's not necessary this is applicable only to brand strategy and advertising and marketing communication.
Right.
I have done this across a varied group of people like engineers and lawyers and CAs and
Right.
students and all kinds of
Workshops,
people.
yeah.
When it comes to brand strategy or brand thinking,
Mm-hmm.
you could use tools for that from the Da Vinci Code when it comes to brainstorming and things like that. But brand strategy is in many ways a different thing. It's the brand story is a different sort of module that I look at.
Very interesting. Creating a narrative for a brand would depend on the market that it is in, or the size of the brand that it is, and the morality or the ethics that you would want to align yourself with, or the values that you have. So I'm saying the brand should ideally look at its own values, its own vision, its market segment, and then think about the vision ideology. That's the core, that's never going to change. And then maybe think about how do you sell that story in different ways, or can it keep changing? How do you set narrative?
Let me walk back to
Sure.
the basics. Okay.
Sure.
I think you're holding up a pen in your hand, right?
Yeah.
Just hold up that pen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Like, how much would you pay for that pen? or pencil.
If it is
Maybe
given to me
$5,
for
$2,
free, then
whatever.
yeah, okay, yeah,
But if I told you that this was the pencil with which Da Vinci sketched his first $1 million painting, how much would you pay for it? Now, what has happened is I have not changed the physical properties of the pencil.
mm-hmm,
I have changed the narrative in between your ears.
mm-hmm.
And because of that, you perceive the pencil to have far higher value,
You basically
right?
nudge me into
That
thinking, yeah,
so that in a nutshell, in the simplest level,
mm-hmm,
is the creation of a brand. A product is just very functional. A brand is the infusion of emotion in a product with the objective of building a relationship with a customer base. That is where we start at. Any brand that you build, that is what you look at. Okay? So, what is it that I am offering? Who is it that I'm trying to offer this to? Why will they want to keep coming back to me time and again, right? So these are the elements which play a huge role in building a brand. Let me give you a few examples just so that you understand how brand stories are created. One of my favorite brands to talk about is Surf Excel. Okay, on the face of it, it's a very boring category, detergents,
right,
right? Damn done. What is it? And for many years in India, you used to have only these clothes which had dirt on them, and then some water would come with the detergent, and some ingredients would start their work, and sparkling white clothes would come out. Or you'd have a really muscular hand in the bucket coming in and just peeling those clothes, removing all the dirt. You know what Surf did? It's a very lateral and creative idea.
mm-hmm,
All the time they were fighting dirt.
mm-hmm,
So they thought to themselves, why don't, instead of fighting dirt, why don't we embrace dirt? What if dirt was the friend? So
right,
it's a classic technique in creative thinking called opposites thinking, ulta soch.
right,
Okay. So if dirt is your friend, if you're no longer afraid of dirt, what possibilities does it open up? So it looked at the mother,
mm-hmm,
and what it found was the primary concern of mothers in India or across the world is to ensure that their children grow up as well rounded people. Their children get all the experiences that they need to get so that they develop holistically.
yeah,
And the little insight they had was children sometimes do not fully participate in life because they are very scared that their clothes will get dirty and they will get shouted at home. That's why when
mm,
kids go to school in uniform, I'm
right,
not talking about rowdy kids, but generally, most kids are very scared about getting Daag on their uniform
mm-hmm,
because they're scared. So Surf took on this stance of Daag Ache Hain, which was like giving children an open ticket to go and have fun, participate in the world, help other people. Even
right,
if you get dirty doing that, it does not matter because Surf will take care of that. So a brand is something which builds a relation. So for the mother, what is it telling the mother? It's telling the mother, we are here with you to bring up your child in the best possible way. And from a purely economic transaction of exchanging some money and buying a pack of surf, you have made that into an emotional connection where the mother now feels if I want to bring my kids up the right way, I must have this brand in my house. So
right.
that's the way brand storytelling and narrative building comes into picture or is kindled.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense also. Um, do you think that the innovation side of things only be on the product side, or it could come from the creative thinking of the marketer as well?
So I think innovation can come from anywhere. So there is a product innovation where the product you create is superior to previous products which existed. For instance, the iPhone was a clear step up from the QWERTY phones before. Touch screen it brought in, it opened up a whole vistas. At a product level, it was something which was innovative. But if you look at e-commerce, is actually a process innovation because they're selling the same products, but what they have done is that they have simplified the process of the customer getting to the product, right? So instead of going to shops, you can now just at the click of a button get that thing at home. So innovation can happen at any level. It can happen at a product level, it can happen at a process level, it can happen at a promotion level in terms of how you communicate your offering. It can happen anywhere.
Right. Because the other day I had listening to somebody and they spoke about Heinz and the way they tell their ads, and every ad that Heinz puts out ends up with it has to be Heinz. Anything you do,
Right.
it has to be Heinz, right? And they also went on to innovate in a way that like when you pour the sauce out, it's always it ends like there is something that ends up at the back and you cannot take that out. And the thing that they thought about is that what if we have two lids to the bottle, one at the top and one below, and it can open from both sides, and
Right.
hence you can use 100% of the product. I mean,
That's an interesting story. I'll just touch upon Heinz
yeah,
since you brought that up. Heinz took it's a very interesting brand to study in terms of innovational thinking. Okay,
yeah,
what they took was that they were a thicker sketch as compared to the others in the market.
yeah.
That could have been perceived as a negative in today's fast-paced times, where it's taking you more time to get the product out of
Yeah.
the bottle. So they tackled that at two ends, actually, literally and metaphorically.
Yes.
One is by making holes at both sides, as you said. That's a great idea. That's a product innovation idea.
Yeah.
But at a communication level, what they also did is because we are thicker, we really have more purity and quality.
Right.
So they elevated the perception of the product in the customer's mind. And there's this iconic ad of Heinz where this guy's working in a skyscraper and he wants to have lunch. He opens his burger and then he wants to put some Heinz on it. So he realizes it's Heinz. So he puts the bottle at the edge of a window. He takes the lift and he goes down 100 floors. So he comes out and he puts out that bun of the burger and the drop of Heinz falls there.
Oh,
So it's a beautiful exaggeration of the thickness of the brand. And it's always Heinz. Like you're saying,
yeah.
there are these elements which happen with brands which people try and create such that they are indelibly connected with the brand in your mind. For
Right.
instance, Heinz is just Heinz, or you could have Surf Excel mein Daag Ache Hain, or you have Nike's Just Do It and that tick. Any brand tries to create these sensorial signatures in your mind so that whenever you're thinking of that brand, at least that line comes or that sort of visual metaphor comes in your mind,
Yes.
or something strikes you. It could even be a sound. For instance, Harley Davidson has actually patented the sound of its engine.
Wow.
It's called potato, basically. Yeah. So the sound of a Harley is distinctive. So that's how branding works. Branding tries to engage all the five senses that you have. So anything which scores. So why is the reason that Coca-Cola has red and white, and it's kept that thing going for years. So brands are all about consistency. You can't change every day if you're a brand. You have to be that constant pillar in consumers' minds because most of life is unpredictable. The psychological level at which brands work is that they give you a sense of calmness and constancy. That's why they are consistently communicated all the time. And a nice flip on that is what Google does. If you see, Google changes its logo every day.
Yeah, every year.
Capture the
Yeah.
flavor,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But that change in itself is now part of the DNA of Google. You expect to see the logo change every day if you go to Google, because keeping track of information of the world which changes all the time is an ever-changing process. So that's the way.
It aligns with the core need of one and the core what Google is anyway. And yeah,
Yes.
that's how they do it. Essentially, you're saying that it is all about human behavior that you are tapping into when you talk about.
Yes. Yes. So what you have to think is, whatever business you are in,
Mhm.
however technical it might seem, there is always a customer at the end of the business. And you're creating a brand for that person. You're creating a brand for that person, right? And if you're doing that, a brand does not exist on the shelf. It exists in the minds of the person you're talking to. If
Right.
you're doing that, person will keep coming back to you. So you find this with organizations as well. In fact, one interesting example in an organization is Eureka Forbes. I think in our country, in many ways, it was a little ahead of its time in terms of the way it did its brand building. Eureka Forbes, I think, never believed that it was in the business of actually selling water purifiers or vacuum cleaners. It was actually in the business of creating relations with Indian homes, which is why if you see their sign-off line says "Your friend for life."
Mhm.
And it at one time, and now not so much the case because of the way security works in buildings and all. At one time, the Eureka Forbes, or the Euro Champ, he was called. He used to come and build a relationship with a family, and then no matter what the company made, he could have sold that product or that brand to those people. So its brand was built first on people and then on product, first on its sales force, so to speak.
That's actually very interesting in the sense that it's like taking a poll and asking, would you buy this? Would you buy this? Would you buy this? What percentage? And then based on that percentage, you'll actually sell them what they want to buy. And it's essentially
Right.
data analytics was what they were doing. That's pretty, yeah, as you said, ahead of its time. Um, you've heard of there's this book, fascinating book called Wanting. It's by this guy called Luke Burgess who talks about mimetic desire, and he talks about the fact that everything that you would want own or want to have in your life is in a nature versus nurture kind of a setting where you see it with somebody else, you get that inspiration, and only then you would want it. Or it is 85% of the time where that is the case, where status is number one, the biggest driver that you that is why you would want something at all. That's why brand positioning. The
Yes.
issue that I see with that is that this will only work in a B2C segment where you can really play with people's emotions. What happens in a B? How do you create a branding, or how do you tell the story in a B2B setting where you have a budget and a purchase department to whose purpose is to technically break the chain of relationship and go for the product which is the cheapest. And yeah,
So
what do you do?
this actually is something which happens in both B2B and B2C.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you're right that it might appear that a purchase department is doing all of that and all of that. But the reason, like for instance, McKinsey,
Mm-hmm.
okay, the great consulting firm, is a B2B,
Yeah.
okay, and they took a conscious decision very early on in their history that they will really charge a premium,
Mm-hmm.
okay, and they will never justify it. They will never come down on cost or things like that. I
Right.
don't know what the status is today, but this is part of how their brand legacy was
Mm-hmm.
built. Okay, why is that? Because they wanted to show their customer that if you're coming to us, don't talk about cost. Take cost out of the equation. Don't haggle.
Mhm.
And I know we are Indians, so everything comes down to haggling. Everything is a process of haggling.
Yeah.
But there's always a brand for which you don't haggle. Not many people will go to the iPhone store in PKC and say, "Arey, thoda kam karke de." What do you do when you reach there? You just pay the price which is asked.
Yeah.
Okay, why is that? Because like the McKinseys did, what they did was they said what they implied is the quality of our knowledge, the quality of our consulting is so high, you better not compromise on their price. If you're serious about your problem, come to us. This is what we take. And the best metaphor I can give you is that of a doctor. In B2B, always remember this. Think of it like a doctor. You don't negotiate with your doctor when you have a problem, right? Whatever your doctor charges you, you pretty much pay, right? So McKinsey, how did they back all of this up? They created models. They also created this great mythology around this company that they only hire from the most elite institutes. So what you're getting is la creme de la creme, the best of the best. These are the people who are going to be on your account. This is what his educational background is. This is the years of experience he's had. You're not going to haggle on cost. Take cost out of the equation. So even when it comes to B2B, okay, the aspirational goal is always to create value to such an extent that you bypass these things. See, brand building, wherever it happens, okay, the reason you create a brand in the first place is to command premium.
Yes.
In any segment. Otherwise, you would not have been creating brands. You would have been in a commodities market.
Correct.
Right? You're not selling grass.
Yeah.
You're selling grass from the fields of Jamaica where, the most chilled dudes live. Suddenly that grass has more value.
Yeah.
Right? So it is all about creation of value, whatever sector you are in. And the moment you lose sight of the fact that you are in the creation of value, perceived value, actually, value in the minds of somebody, that's where storytelling comes in. So even for B2B, probably even more, there's a necessity to do this.
Yeah, but it is harder B2B.
It is. No brand building is easy. Even B2C is damn hard. You're thinking it's easy because you see the ads, but a lot of those flop. A lot of those guys make losses and they have to take the product off the market. So that loss, that possibility to fail is always there. I guess only about 10 or less than 10% of any product launches, which is launched, succeeds in the market.
True. What was the experience like in working at an ad agency? Your entire book is basically based on that.
I would like to say one thing, that while the book is based, see, every story has to have some sort of a setting.
Yeah.
Okay. The attempt in The Madness Starts at 9 was to create a sort of a Desi Dilbert. If you have read Dilbert cartoons.
No.
Okay. It was to create a humorous world around the Indian corporate life. Okay. So the chapters in The Madness Starts at 9, most of them are things which are corporate milestones which happen in any organization. It's not just an ad agency. For instance, there's a chapter on performance appraisals, which is called True Lies. Neither the person interview sticks to the truth. There was a chapter on office parties called Wait Until Dark, because in the darkness of an office parties, a lot of careers get resurrected and such. Okay, so all the chapters most of the chapters, what I tried to do was try to to it. But that being said, what I found in terms of working in an ad agency was it was a very lively environment.
Yeah.
It was extreme. There were two. I think the ad agency culture has now come to intrude the cultures of many other sectors. The ad agency culture was the first one where you could talk to your boss on a first name basis.
Yes.
So I never was in a scenario where I've ever called anybody sir.
Yeah.
In fact, classmates of mine from the management institute used to sometimes come to visit me at my office. They used to see me talking to my boss and just calling him by name. or her by name, and they used to say, "Arey, yaar, how is this possible?" That was an interesting facet. There was a bit of tea which was there in ad agencies, which I think is many other sectors could do well to incorporate in their own working. I think that was one of the strong points. The other strong point I thought in ad agencies was the fact that you had people of very diverse backgrounds coming together in one place. And that manthan which happens of people coming together from very diverse backgrounds is the best place to have
Creative.
really interesting ideas coming up.
Yeah.
Because it is through that abrasion of people coming together from different backgrounds and different polarities that you get something really different coming up. So that is something I really enjoyed being part of an ad agency. The atmosphere is always full of ideas, excitement. What's the next campaign? So I quite enjoyed my time when I was there.
Yeah,
And I still train a lot of agencies.
as you said, the informality of things really uh, breaks barriers between hierarchies, and people are open to talk in
Yes.
terms of directly to the highest person on the chain and maybe bounce off ideas and whatever. It's a good way to
No,
run.
so
Yeah.
I'll just add one more thing to what you were saying, which is, see, an idea is designation agnostic. An idea can come from any level of the organization.
Right.
Okay. It's not that you have to have spent 10, 15, 20 years for you to come up with an idea on a particular brand. You could have been there for the last 1 week and suddenly a brainwave happens and you have an idea which could change the fortunes of that brand and that company. So I think that realization is very important, not just in the advertising sector. I think it is important everywhere.
Right.
That when it comes to ideation, which is the basically looking at a situation in a different, new, novel way, advertising taught me a lot. In fact, that newcomer's perspective is invaluable. In fact, just coming back to when you were talking about, these are usually created by a disruptor. Innovations who comes from outside the category. The
Right.
smartphone should have happened from Nokia, but it did not. It happened from Apple because Apple came into that market with very wide open eyes and so naive innocence about it, about possibilities. And that's where innovation happens. So that newcomer's perspective is very important when it comes to innovation and creativity.
That's because he's not bogged down by the experience of operations and doing things that would take
Yes.
the mundane and
Not just that, the more you are in a particular sector and domain, the
Yeah.
more you begin to think like what people in that domain have thought over the years. This is what is called being trapped in the box.
Yes.
When people say out of the box thinking, what does that mean? That means if you've been in a certain field for a certain time, there are some cultural paradigms, there are some product paradigms, there are some realities and assumptions that you make which you think are absolute truths because you have been there for so long.
Yeah.
It's only when you come from outside you think ye kya hai, ye to bakwas hai. And then you see things in a completely new light. That is when innovation happens. That is out of the box thinking.
Right. Also, then that would mean that feedback should be taken in a way that is inclusive of opinions and ideas, and it shouldn't be that we are stagnated to our own ideas and our own way of thinking. And that will also dim down the light of where creativity and creative thinking could
Yes.
maybe. Yeah.
So it's always important to have a sort of disruptive influence in any group. In any group, it's always important to have somebody who will question. In fact, there was this president of the United States called John F. Kennedy.
Yes.
And in decision making, he had introduced one very interesting concept called the devil's advocate. And his brother, Robert Kennedy, was designated the devil's advocate. And what was the job of the devil's advocate? The job of the devil's advocate was if they were going ahead with any policy decision, he had to come there and his whole job was to poke holes in it. Basically, say why this won't happen. What are the pitfalls you have to overcome? And this is such a useful thing even to adopt as an organization, because suppose you're pitching to a client and the whole team has put together a presentation. You, in your limited wisdom, will think that is the best way to do it. But you need somebody to come and say why it won't work.
Yeah.
Pratipaksh, basically. I think that word is trending nowadays. But Pratipaksh Bhavana basically is to hold an opposite thought in your mind. So try and trace the opposite thought. Why is it that this won't work? So the more organizations have that kind of thinking at work within their teams, somebody will be like an agent provocateur. He will shake up things. He will say something ataran, sometimes just for the sake of it. That really helps the whole process.
As long as, so how do you?
Yes,
then,
you have to create a culture. You have
Yes.
to create a culture
How
like
do
that.
you? How do
So
you?
that person can't be chastised.
Exactly. So how do you either create the culture to receive feedback or give feedback in a way that it is received in with the intention that it is given?
See, I think while a lot of these logical sounding arguments can be made for all of this, remember one thing: everything is personal, right? It's about a relationship.
Yes.
The boss has to create a relation with every member of the team such that they feel he will hear them, give them a patient hearing, and they can tell him things when they are going wrong as well. And that's a personal equation which has to be built, and it takes time, and there are no quick fixes for this. You must have that kind of open channel where somebody who is far junior to you can tell you something. This is not the way I think it should be done. You will find that probably in the better organizations in the world, that is always the case. You have somebody who can stand up and question what is happening.
Just like an agency culture.
But you have to create that.
Yeah, just like how the
In agency cultures, yes, it happens, but it happens, I think, in other places as well. You will see that happening in sporting teams, like you follow football,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So, in different situations, there are different things which happen. For instance, if there is a corner being defended, a lot of these teams have this leadership by rotation kind of funda. So if a corner is being defended, which is your favorite team, just for so that I can just phrase it better.
Arsenal FC.
Okay, so suppose Arsenal is defending a corner. Okay, what happens during the corner is a guy like a William Saliba or a Gabriel. They will assume leadership of that situation, because in that situation they know more than the guards and the Sakas and the guards. Okay, in that situation their knowledge is more. It does not matter whether they, in terms of star value, those other guys might be more.
Right.
It matters that in that particular situation these guys know what is the better thing to do, right? So these kind of ideas, you see it in work in some places, but that's how great organizations work.
So you're saying that there should be hierarchy nonetheless, but there should be an open channel to be able to criticize hierarchy, but in the end the point or the decision maker is still hierarchy.
No, so the final decision is always the captain's. Okay?
Yeah.
Just to bring you back to that same metaphor, the final decision is always the captain's. But if a Rohit Sharma is told by a Bumrah that I want 2 slips, he should have the wisdom to realize that Bumrah knows what he's talking about, which is why he must put an additional slip. Rohit will finally do the decision, or whoever the captain will take that final decision. But that facility should always be there, that somebody who's talented and he might be young should have the chance to express their opinion. I believe in strong leaders. I think there is a necessity for any great organization. Why do we look at leaders with awe? Because they are the guiding lights which everybody else follows, right? Yeah. You look at leaders across the board and you appreciate qualities about them. Sometimes they might be headstrong, but that's probably part of it.
It's interesting that you just putting on the point. You've also written this book called Lessons from the Playground.
Yeah.
So, is this the theme of how it is that what you do in a sports team would ideally also culminate in terms of how you relate with your team members in an organization? what happens if you are an individual?
Sport has been a lifelong long passion of mine.
Yeah.
Okay, and since I became a sort of aficionado of out of the box thinking,
Mhm.
what happens in out of the box thinking is you borrow from another domain. For instance, the airline industry can learn a lot by borrowing from the hospitality industry and vice versa.
Mhm.
For me, sport was a platform, a stage where you could see a lot of parallels with the business world, because there are many ready puns, and I'm a big pundit, so I love
Yeah.
these puns. Like, for instance, goals are there in both sides. There
Yeah.
is goals in sports. There are obviously every organization tries to achieve its own goals. There are star players in an organization. There are star players in sporting teams as well. There are problems which arise with star players in organizations. There are problems which arise in star players with sporting teams as well. There are qualities which a champion shows, which makes him a champion or her a champion. Likewise, there will be qualities an organization needs to show, which will make them better at what it is that they are doing. So for me, those parallels were very ready and apparent, and I thought there was a way to codify it. So since I looked at many sport, I thought, what is a way to put this in a structure which people will enjoy and it won't be preachy?
Right.
I think one of the greatest things you have to do if you want to teach or inspire people to do something is not preach. You have to kind of woo them or charm them or persuade them into a different way of thinking.
Nudge them.
So
Yeah.
I looked at nudge, yeah, gently. What I did is I divided my entire knowledge of sport into 4 P's:
Mhm.
people, platforms, processes, and pinnacles. So people were about sporting heroes of mine who were at the absolute were champions of their domain. So there was Sachin Tendulkar, Pele, Roger Federer, Michael Jordan, Muhammad Ali. Okay, platforms were stages in sport like World Cup cricket, World Cup soccer, Olympics, Wimbledon, things like that. Processes were processes in sport like leadership and captaincy. Okay, ideas which changed cricket. Barcelona's playing style at that time, because when I had written this book, Tiki Taka was a big thing, right? Quotables which have come from sport, things like that. And pinnacles were once in a lifetime achievements, a time when somebody has hit the absolute top. Michael Phelps winning all those medals at big. Roger Bannister running the mile in under 4 minutes, which was one of the greatest achievements in the last century. Kapil Dev's 175 not out against Zimbabwe. So through all these stories, I tried to bring lessons which were relevant to the business world and make it bring the energy of sport into it, and also make it enjoyable for somebody to read and experience, especially sporting fans.
You essentially gamified.
So it touched upon things like creative thinking. Yes.
Yeah. You essentially gamified the idea of learning and execution, and it has to be fun, right? And you have a lot of fun while playing sports.
Yeah, so it was all about pulling. Correct. So it was. I'll just give you a nice parallel. It was all about finding the right parallel. And one of the first parallels I begin the book with is the real name of Pele, or the full name of Pele was Edson Arantes do Nascimento. Now, nobody would have remembered that, but everybody remembers Pele.
Right.
Right? That's why when you select a brand name, it has to be really memorable, like Apple. Okay, and Apple is wonderfully. Apple also, there's a great story to something called International Business Machine, or IBM. Apple was far more friendly. So you already have a conversation which has begun.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if the thought process or it comes out, if you put something out there, irrespective of what your intention is for the perception to cause, there is still some kind of a thought process that you start in the minds of people. What I want to say is that, like, this is a blue mouse, right? Now, if I put this out there, with a narrative. You, as a viewer or an end user or a passerby or a pedestrian, okay, will have some kind of thought of your own, irrespective of what I have narrated as the brand's official position of what this means and why the color blue and so on and so forth. As you said, Apple,
Yeah.
um, like just taking inference from that, like I'm I don't know if Apple was named Apple so that it became friendly for people just because IBM is a boring name, International Business Machines. Yeah, it is a boring name, but is that the reason why Apple named itself Apple so that it became friendly? Maybe not. And
No, okay, let me just come back to that Apple example and extrapolate it a little more.
yeah,
Okay. See, Apple, you just can't name something that and leave it at that.
mm-hmm,
There is a context which was existing.
mm-hmm,
IBM was user unfriendly computers. Only people who had engineering knowledge or programming knowledge could touch an IBM computer.
mm-hmm,
Okay. Apple brought in this thing called graphical user interface.
right,
Strictly speaking, that's not their innovation, but they popularized it.
yes,
Okay. They opened the doors for computers to the masses. And it's probably difficult for you because you're not that generation to know that
correct,
there was a real and present fear about computers at that time,
mm-hmm,
right? Which is why the name Apple was such a wonderful contrast. It was so
correct,
easy on the tongue and it was so friendly to sound, basically. Phonetically, IBM versus Apple. Apple is very easy on the ear, right? It's friendly. That logo is colorful. The computer looked like nothing you had seen at that point in time.
right,
All those factors came into play. And some of the advertising they did, which launched the product, and you should look this up. There's an ad called 1984.
yes,
Apple 1984, which has been called the ad of the last century,
yes,
which ran on Super Bowl and I think in many ways started the trend of this Super Bowl advertising. It
okay,
clearly showed the story of what Apple was about. It was a rebel.
mm-hmm,
Basically, Apple was a rebel. It came into the market as a rebel, as what is called a challenger brand. Today, Apple is the market. It is the one which needs to be challenged. But
right.
that's how brand story.
How do you then become good at storytelling? There should be
So,
one way or
so that's an interesting question. How do you become better at business storytelling or brand storytelling or anything?
yeah,
I think it starts fundamentally at becoming better at storytelling. Okay? And I'm not kidding. It's actually true. You need to become better at storytelling. And it's, I can't underline the fact how important this is for you in life.
mm-hmm,
Because everything that you do is your conversations are basically you telling the right kind of stories to people who influence them to your advantage. Okay. So how do you become that? One is you try and discover stories from your own life and try and reframe them in your mind to narrate. Okay, which means you sensitize your antenna to stories from your own life which are interesting and from the lives of friends which you can borrow from. The moment you develop this attitude, you will easily see narratives forming and you'll keep hearing interesting stories everywhere. Everywhere you go, you will see an interesting story, right? The moment and the better you get at this, the better your conversations will be, the better your presentations will be. It's amazing. Everybody tells a story at some point in time. Alexander, 3000 years ago, Alexander is this young dude who wants to go out and conquer the world. At 21, think about it. At 21, who wakes up and thinks that? Okay.
yeah,
But he knows that he can't do it on his own. He has to get all the Greek tribes to march with him. And that time, Greece is very disjointed. There are separate states. Each of them have their own, like Athens, Sparta, all of them are different.
yeah,
Alexander knows he has to unify them. So he tells them a compelling vision, basically. He knows that they otherwise will not come and fight for him. But one thing they are all proud of is that the fact that they think Greece is superior to the rest of the world when it comes to culture. For them, Greeks are the only civilized people in the world, and the rest of the world are barbarians. That's literally where the word comes from. People who don't speak Greek, they are called barbarians, right? So he says, he tells them a story. He says, come, walk with me, and help me make Greece the civilizing agent of the world. That is a compelling story to tell those people. And they march with him because they find that inspiring, right? So you will find stories everywhere. Become a story magnet. You will find stories in every domain. From there's this wonderful story somebody in my workshop told me. She was like the director of a company and she cited a problem in her home. Her son used to eat carrots, but he used to never eat cucumbers. Never.
Okay.
Whatever she did used to fail. She used to try and hide the cucumber in dishes, failed. She used to try and get the doctor to tell him to eat cucumbers, failed. Father scolding, failed. One day his sister came, and this elder sister, and the elder sister, kind of like the younger brother, used to really look up to his elder sister. So the elder sister says, why aren't you eating these cucumbers? They are just green carrots. And from that day, he started eating cucumbers. Oh, that's really interesting. Actually, it's a technique where she reframed something unpleasant as something pleasant, right? So, all stories, if you look at what is it that the reason firstly a story will resonate with you or तुम्हारा कुछ तो suddenly जाग जाएगा अंदर से is because there is a fundamental insight or an idea which is being tapped into.
Right.
And try and articulate what that idea is. So the more you find stories around your life, the more you'll become at telling stories. So if I were to give you a very simple format, and this comes from a guy called Ken Adams, who does improv theater, which I found very useful. So say once upon a time, okay, suppose whatever your business is, once upon a time, okay, so once upon a time, what was to happen in your market? Okay, every day, which is what is the reality of what is happening until one day. That's when you come into the market. And because of that, how has behavior changed? Every day henceforth, what happens? Right? It's a very simple format. Once upon a time, every day, until one day, because of that, and every day thereon. It's a very simple. If you look at your business and you actually fill this up, you'll find a very compelling brand story.
And then you think about how do you innovate on multiple pieces of ad content to create around this, and then so on and so forth.
Sure. So I would always say one thing. Your fundamental core story has to be very strong and well defined. Creating the ad contents is it's like hub and spoke. So if you have a story, everything else flows from that.
Right.
It's much simpler.
Yeah, would be. Yeah. What is the percentage do you see that? Okay, first is what is the difference between marketing, advertising, and sales? And secondly, see it's a very easy answer to give. But how much of advertising gets converted into direct sales? Is
I
there a good
really,
percentage?
marketing. Just to answer your first question, marketing is all about need creation in the mind of somebody.
Yeah.
Sales is actually doing the process of selling. It's the transaction.
Correct.
So marketing is always if you like Venn diagrams, marketing is the outer circle and sales is a part of that circle.
Yes.
Okay. What part of advertising actually results into sales? I think that question people have not yet answered accurately. Okay, so I wouldn't even begin to answer that question because nobody really knows. There's this famous saying: nobody knows what part of your advertising budget is wasted. Okay, because there are many factors which go in terms of ensuring what really caused that sale. So generally what people do is they see, okay, मैंने advertising थोड़ा बढ़ा दिया, okay, it does happen, because what happens is when you increase advertising, the chance of your product coming into the mind of the customer is more.
Yes.
That's why she will buy your product more.
Yes.
So it's usually correlated.
Yes.
But the exact effect that advertising has on an increase in sale is probably very difficult to determine. I don't think it has still been answered convincingly.
Yeah, and I don't think it would be in this human behavior being irrational and unpredictable, and advertising being based on essentially selling to humans who are irrational and unpredictable. I think the results that will then come out are also unpredictable.
Yeah, so you might find that the sales might come a little later. Oh, Tabhi chamka. Who knows?
Right.
It might not happen that you advertise today, you will get the sale tomorrow. You might get it a week later. So there is no way of knowing really, unless we start putting probes in people's heads and all, and really then figuring out how they think.
Okay.
In many ways, we still haven't figured out exactly how we think. So
Yeah. I was speaking to a neuroscientist the other day, and I was like, it's quite creepy to know that we've done so much with this world and the kind of technology that we've created of just studying the human brain, and we only know 15% of how this thing works. And Mihir, we know only 5%. Like, we technically don't know how we perceive information and how things happen, and it's pretty cool actually to think about how much we don't know and how much more we can do.
I think that's always something which should keep us humble, that we don't really know much. We just get around by trial and error.
You've heard of marketing awards and awards in the ad industry of this ad performed so well and is the best designed award, and basically.
So most of the awards which are there are not basis ad performed well. There is something called the FEs, which is effectiveness. But I think again, maybe the real awards which the ad industry needs is ads which are voted by customers or consumers. Rather than a lot of these advertising awards are it's nice at a certain level because it's the industry coming together and celebrating something which has been created by the industry. But if you really want to know whether advertising works or not, the only way to really know that, gauge that, is to ask people, the real people who are the target of that. So FEs might be close to it. It's effectiveness, where those sales figures which actually happened are all, I think, skeptical at best. But yeah, it's probably one thing which is decent to some extent. There are things which is right now, something called the Cannes Advertising Film Festival is happening in Cannes. And I think the highlight of this year's festival probably is the fact that Elon Musk is coming there to address people, which has not happened before. It's good, but again, those awards there are I guess they're more like celebrations of creativity more than effectiveness.
Awards for a piece of creative that is promoting a brand and celebrating that.
No, so every industry now has awards. Basically, it's come down to that. You'll see automobile sector has its own set of awards, and films have always had awards. The Bollywood industry now. But I think at a certain level, the value of these awards might not have been what they were at before. Like for instance, Grammys in music. I don't know who follows the Grammys anymore. Oscars, for that matter, it's falling. So I don't know whether that's a factor of people thinking the awards aren't as valuable as they used to be, or that just people have lost interest.
No, but they are prestigious. Like Oscars and Grammys, and I'm not sure about Filmfare, but Oscar is prestigious, Grammys are prestigious, and
no, so I think
Nobel
what has
Prize
happened
is
even in the
prestigious.
Oscars and the Grammys is that there's a lot of this posturing which happens, which has put off a lot of people. If you follow the Oscars, a lot of celebrities come on stage and make statements about which is good in a way, but they also make statements about things which they shouldn't really be talking about at times. Probably they might not have the right credentials for that. Is it just a PR stunt? There is an element of fakeness which is crept into all these awards.
Not the Nobel Prize.
But yeah, I guess if it works for you.
Not the.
Not yet. I hope not.
Yeah.
I hope not.
Yeah.
Something has to be noble, pun intended.
Yes. True. What do you do in your free time apart from the thinking out? Like, do you think out of the box? How do you spend your weekends?
So I like reading. I like watching stuff.
What do you watch?
I follow sport. I love watching movies in theater because I like to see what the audience likes. That's always a barometer of shifting things and trends, and it just what works. Since I'm in that line where it's all about touching the right triggers in people, sit in the theater and watching the audience as well and their reactions is great fun. I like to play football when I can. I've not been off late. I like to write. I write extensively, so I blog every day from Facebook, Instagram. Not blog as in
put up posts. Yes.
Put up posts. So I'm fairly regular, and the reason I do that is because it's a cerebral exercise for me. It's like how you warm up. It's my cerebral warm up. I always recommend you should begin your day by either trying to write a joke of your own or writing some post of your own. And your joke doesn't have to be ultra funny. It just has to be something which makes you smile. It just gets your mind working, basically.
Not a bad idea. I mean, yeah, not a bad idea. To start, or maybe get a trampoline and jump on that like 5 times.
So joke writing is one of the easiest ways to become more creative, because fundamentally the structure of a joke is you are going in a certain direction, and then you have something like the punchline, which is a lateral jump out of that situation. When a guy comes to a mechanic, he's given his car to a mechanic, and the mechanic says, "Sir, I couldn't fix your brakes, but I made your horn louder." Right? That's a simple thing, but it just is taking in a certain direction. Boom! While it sounds absurd, at a certain level, it works. Right? So the moment you get better at writing jokes, like these one-liners also, you will find that you are more creative, because any joke is a mini innovation. Any joke. It has to be. It's an out-of-the-box experiment.
Yeah. You think ads would do better if they're funny?
Most ads try to be funny. If you see the ads, everybody tries to be funny. It's very important to remember one thing. Every brand has a certain character. A brand is like a person.
Yes.
Okay, and that persona is defined. So if that persona is not funny, don't be funny. Dettol would rarely be funny.
Yeah.
Okay. Whereas if you come to something like Fevicol has made its name by being funny.
Yeah.
Right? Taking everything that Fevicol has done, that is the brand persona which has been defined. Whereas if you come to something like Asian Paints, it's like kind of a smile humor, not laugh out loud kind of humor. Like that. So every brand has its own persona. So it's like you as a person. कोई लोगों से joke सुनना अच्छा भी नहीं लगता. Right? When somebody, one of your friends who's ultra serious, suddenly cracks a joke, you think, what is wrong with it? Right? It's off character. Likewise, even for a brand, not everybody should do humor. If the humor is there in the brand narrative, do humor. If it's not, don't do it.
But what if once in a blue moon?
Once a while is fine. But don't make it a habit. Like, which are the ads you remember from Indian ads?
The Naukri ad. Do you remember that?
That's very nice.
That was
very nice. Hari Sadhu,
yes.
Hari Sadhu. Yeah. Brilliant. That's a brilliant ad. I think that is one of the best ads made in that domain, and it took a fundamental insight. Why is it so funny? Because it touched a pain point, and
Yeah.
the pain point was everybody leaves a job actually for a boss.
Yeah.
Boss is an oppressive character, and that's why you leave the job. But you can't. There were two ways of saying it. You could have shown a guy being harangued and then escaping, but they took a very funny way of saying it.
Yeah.
So I think, and also it was the first ad that they put out, which is why that kind of set their tonality. Remember, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. First impressions are always important in any life, right? So the first ad the brand is remembered by usually becomes an overwhelming thing. So Naukri, I remember, and like you did, only
Naukri, yeah.
essentially because of that ad.
Happy Dent also, the glowing of the teeth.
Yeah, glowing of the teeth.
And
again, see, but that is a product which is like an FMCG. It's a chewing gum. You can have fun with it. Right?
Yeah.
But if you go to, let's say, Johnson's baby oil or something, you suddenly can't have a joke happening there. Right?
Cred,
it has to be pure, mild, gentle. Cred is nice.
Yeah, Cred does. They actually hire a lot of comedians to write their jokes.
Correct. And so they have taken that as a process innovation. In fact, let me put it that way. That's a process innovation. Because it's not so much as to what they do in terms of brands. The process itself is different. They're not going to mainstream ad agencies. They're going to a different sector altogether, which is really out of the box thinking, and credit to them.
Yeah. And also, is it necessary for the ad to... Is there a way that serendipity could play a part in... Like, how do I articulate this better? Is it like even in an advertisement, you are hinting at something related to what you're doing, and you create a connect with the person you want to add value to? Should that always be the case, or can serendipity also play a role? That, I mean, I'm not sure how do I articulate this better, but should I be...
No, I get what you're saying.
Selling, should I be showing me as the protagonist of the ad all the time, or...
No, not necessary. I understand what you're saying. Just because you're talking to a certain audience does not mean you show the audience you're talking to. Okay?
Right.
In the ad. For example, the best example I can give you is surf. Much of the ad is showing children and children doing stuff, but they're actually talking to the mother. They're not. No child goes out to buy detergent. That would really be a really bad childhood if you're going out just to buy detergents. But they're talking to the mother. They don't need to show the mother, but it's very well implied because you're attracting a mother's attention by showing what happens to children. And for instance, even Fevicol, they rarely show carpenters and all of that. Whereas carpenters are essentially the guys who buy Fevicol, but they're creating stories which they will find funny, and that endears the brand to them.
How can you use technology to... How can you use Chatgpt to better your creativity or ad making skills? If ever there is.
So, to be honest, I have not really delved very deep into all of that. But from what I get from artificial intelligence and how some people use it, you can generate options by giving some keywords, and you can probably generate scripts and visuals and things like that. But it is all coming down. It's a tool.
Right.
It's a tool, from what I understand and from what I can gather so far. As of now, it's still a tool which, if the user of the tool is good, the output will be good. Okay, I don't think we are yet at that stage where by itself it's going to do something which is... It needs to be given the right instructions to get the right output. I think it's just another tool. I think as of now we don't need to worry about it. In the futures, you never know. So,
right. So the creativity aspect, maybe we don't need to worry about from an AI agent yet.
Not as of now. I think the quality of the output, it will probably give you more balls to play with. But the selection, the qualitative selection of which line to use, which visual is perfect for the brand, all of that is still in the hands of, let's say, humans.
Yeah. Awesome. What advice would you give to anybody who's starting out becoming
In life?
in life, one. Number two is as an ad man or a woman.
So
Yeah.
I think let me give advice for a generation which is stepping out now. Okay. I think the biggest advice I would give is understand life is not a bed of roses and get used to accepting failure.
Mm-hmm.
Our entire cultural system is not very good at that. We really don't encourage people to fail.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more you fail, and this is something again which is a subset of being a creative person, because in creativity, to come up with a one good idea, you need to come up with 10 average ones at least.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the first idea you will get will be the perfect one. Likewise, in life, especially in today's time, there are so many options for what you can do.
Right.
You might not find your dream calling at the first go. You might not even know what it is in your 20s.
Right.
Some people are fortunate enough, they are extremely, but then I
Self-aware.
would think that
Yeah.
is a far smaller percentage of the population, far smaller.
Mm-hmm.
The larger percentage of the population will have to find their way to what it is that they really like doing in life. Give yourself that time, give yourself the opportunity to fail at a few things and
Mm-hmm.
be okay with it.
Right.
It's okay to fail because you will succeed only after you have failed quite a bit. So I would strongly recommend embrace failure as a friend. Don't actively go out to fail. Whatever you're doing, do it wholeheartedly. Do it like it's your best shot. Okay? If you fail at it, then you probably will realize later on that maybe that wasn't your thing. It wasn't your calling. It's I like to call this like nowadays people say ikigai, but I think we have a term in Indian mythology and Indian culture as well, which is as good, which is Swadharma. Right?
Okay.
Find your Swadharma, whatever it is, and it's going to take you time. It's
Yeah.
going to take you time. Give yourself that time.
Right. You seen Rock On, the movie?
Yes,
So at the
the
end,
one with Farhan Akhtar.
yes.
Yeah.
So the last part of the movie is that Joe is on his way to the airport to he's getting a job
And he comes back.
and he comes back, but then that part where they shot that the wife holds his hand and the band starts playing and they start hearing it on the radio and then he fights with her and to go and play and then they've obviously ended the movie in a good way that they've given a story that Joe starts this and then he's successful and then they all run a club together and so on and so forth. Point is that this is where the calling comes. It becomes somewhere down the line you really come to know that this is what it is that you want to do irrespective of whatever.
So, correct. But what is implicit in that scene, and it's not dwelt on, is any pursuit of a calling
Mhm.
or something you really cherish doing involves a price to pay and a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Okay? It involves that sacrifice. Maybe the thing you most like doing isn't lucrative enough. Are you okay with that? Those are tough calls which are taken at a personal, individual level. So that's what I was saying. Find your colleague, but there will be a price to pay in case you want to pursue that. There are many professions which, like the stand-up scene in India. Those first few guys who started out in the stand-up scene, they, I'm sure, did it for pure passion because at that time it wasn't that much money. There were not Netflix and Amazon Primes and all doing special shows for these guys where they could make a lot more money. But they stuck to that. They stuck to that. They stuck through a period in which remuneration wasn't great, but they loved doing it. They felt alive doing it every day, and that's why they did it. Right. So it depends on you as a person. Are you a practical person? कि चलो ये मेरे को लाइफ में चाहिए मैं करूँगा. Maybe it's not so much profession led as much as it might be, let's say, I want these kind of things in my life. I want these milestones. I want a house, I want a car, it might be that for you. Every person is different. I can't make a blanket statement for anybody. But I'm saying more from what I feel. Following a passion, I always found being true to your passion and going for it no matter what is something which fulfills you. There's this great line by Guy de Bond which says, the ultimate achievement in life is to blur the dividing line between work and play. And that's what I hope for everybody, basically. Find that thing where you don't feel like you're working. You just feel like it's something you have to do and put out in the world.
On that note, I don't think there's anything more that we can get in terms of an inspiration. Thank you so much, Vinay.
My pleasure.
And I think we will have round 2, round 3, round 4 in a proper setup, in a proper studio, just to get started. And yeah, thank you so much for giving us this time. I am sure that if not anybody else, I still learned a lot with the way that brands should be positioned and how you should think about what kind of a core you want to build in people's minds and the perception that you want to build, and very enlightening. Hopefully we can use this to implement some things that we've learned today. Thank you so much, Vinay. Yeah, we will see you soon in live interaction.
See you.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for tuning in, you guys. If you like this, then you can hit the like button. The algorithm likes it, gives me more views, and maybe I can contemplate on keeping this channel for free for you to see. If you hit the subscribe button, the algorithm likes that as well. But unlike the like button, this is more useful because you'd be actually notified by every time we do drop a video on this channel. If you have any complaints regarding the content that we drop or the questions that we ask, or you want to give us any suggestions with questions or people that you want us to interview, we have added a feedback form in the description. You are very welcome to fill that up and let me know. If you hated this content and you do not want to see my face ever again, and do not want to share it with anybody, and do not want to refer this kind of content with anyone, then until you do tune in to my next episode or my last episode, or you do tune in, I would like to wish you in Truman Burbank's very own words, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. Cheers.